Good. Okay. Today, can't say that this is like the most interesting chapter. Can't say that. But we're gonna, it's part of that commitment to do like the whole book. It's the challenge, you know. It's I feel that like today, especially when it comes to programming, many times we choose and pick like, you know, things that are, you know, gonna get us the ratings and like, you know, and just to some extent it's a little bit superficial. It's you know, there's a series I want to do. I've been playing with for a while. When, you know, at some point maybe I'll do that. It's like, you know, like 10 top sugyas of the Talmud. A lot of people don't know the Talmud. They never learn Talmud, and it seems like boring. And there's like, oh my God, look at the whole thing is like. So we choose like a couple of things. So is it going to give you a sense of the Talmud? Yes and no, but same goes here. I mean, I could like taking like just a couple of highlights of yechezkel and do that, but that's a little bit different approach this time. So today, not the greatest, most exciting chapter. Nonetheless, sure. We're gonna. I'm Kaf Hey. Kaf Hey. Perek Kaf Hey, chapter 25. So, before delving into this chapter itself, Perek Kaf Hey starts a new unit in the book. Okay, just to kind of like exactly. So the previous chapter ends with the idea of Asara B'Tevet, you know, the whole thing starts, and then the last kind of pasuk of the chapter is that says that the messenger is going to come, and that means the Churban has taken place. So, and you don't have to be, so yechezkel doesn't have to be silent anymore. Okay, but now what we are is in that limbo between the last prophecy and the palit, the messenger that hasn't come yet. Okay, and in this kind of space, what happens is that it's a separate unit. There's a separate unit. These are chapter 25 to 32. And all those chapters are prophecies about the other nations. The other nations, the neighbors, the nations that have some sort of interaction with the Jewish people. Nothing to do with the Jews, so to say, at least not directly. So those prophecies are between the prophecies that talk about the Churban, the destruction of Yerushalayim and the temple, i.e. prior to the Churban, and what happens after the Churban, which is going to start from chapter 33. Okay? That's basically, this is where we are. Now, 25, Kaf Hey. So, if you remember, yechezkel is supposed to be like in silence also. So what is this? So if you remember, we mentioned that one of the approaches says, indeed, he was in silence, and those prophecies that we have here in those chapters are actually out of sequence. The other approach that we said was that indeed he was commanded to be silent. However, it's with regards to the Jewish people. And therefore, the prophecies that we have here until chapter 32 is about the other nations. Okay? Either way, these are the two approaches to explain how we have those prophecies in the time that chronologically he was silent. Right? Because God told him, okay, this is it, finished. The siege on Yerushalayim started. You're not going to speak anymore until the Palit, the messenger, is going to come and tell you that destruction took place. Okay. Nonetheless, we have those prophecies. You have those chapters, those 7 chapters. So either way, either approach is acceptable. So the question is not so much the chronological one, but the more interesting question is, what's the point? Why does Yechezkel have 7 chapters of prophecies talking about, we'll see, Ammon, Moab, Plishtim, Mitzrayim, Aram, all the other nations, like, nothing to do with us. So what's the point? What's the point? Yeah, you have something? Yeah, yeah. Okay. So you're saying this is part of the consolation? It's like everybody's being punished? No, it's to show that there's a ruler to the world, and you do the right thing. You're rewarded. It's not that only the Jews had sinned, and because of that they're punished, but whoever is going to sin is going to punish. Okay, so you're absolutely right. This is part of it, but I think that there's another aspect here. And the aspect goes all the way to the Torah. If you remember, Moshe Rabbeinu already uses it. Lama yomru Mitzrayim v'ra'a otziam la'arog otam be'arim u'lechalotam me'al pnei adama. Whenever there was a major catastrophe in the desert, Moshe pulls out that cart saying, God, this is going to be Chilul Hashem. This is desecration of your name. What the other nation is going to say. Okay, so in a similar way, there was a fear for Chilul Hashem during this time. Think about it. If Yerushalayim and the Jewish people, if Yerushalayim is destroyed, the temple is destroyed, the house of God, the Jewish God is destroyed, it might cause some people, especially the other nations, we're talking about here about the other nations, might cause them to think, our God is stronger. Our God is better. Look what happened to the Jewish God. Finished. His house is on fire. So to kind of reject that approach, those chapters are here. Yechezkel is talking directly to those nations and tell them, you guys are going to be punished. Yes, he is a man. That's his job as a prophet. And not only that, even though you are temporarily successful, because obviously those are the nations that gives troubles to the Jewish people, even though you are successful at this point, God is going to punish you later on. It's part of God's plan, even destroying his own temple, even destroying Yerushalayim, blah, blah, blah. It's part of God's plan. But you should know you're going to be punished. So don't think that you are something special or whatever, or don't think that you beat the Jewish God. You're in the service of the Jewish God. Okay? That's basically what happened. So in here, we're going to discuss prophecies about Ammon, Moab, Edom, Plishtim, Tzor, Sidon, and Mitzrayim. Okay, 7 nations. Now, those prophecies are not necessarily going to be in a chronological order, but rather it has from different prophecies from different times, some before the destruction of the temple, some after destruction of the temple. How do I know that? Because Yechezkel himself gives us the dates. I don't want to be a genius, right? He tells us, Bashana Asirit, Ba'asiri b'shnei masar. Okay, so that means in the 10th year, and then later on we have another prophecy, for example, that says Ba'ashtei asarei shana be'achad lachodesh, in the 12th year. So it's not in chronological order. Okay, so what is the order here? There's got to be some sort of a system. So I should have brought a map. Actually, it's a geographical order. First of all, is the nations that are in the east. Okay, and then from the east, you go. Well, you can't go west, obviously. That's the sea, right? So the east. Then you go down to the south, to the Plishtim. Then later on, it's Tzor and Sidon that are where Lebanon is, up in the north. And finally, it's Mitzrayim. So there's some sort of a geographical order, and perhaps there's something else that we're gonna try to kind of experiment with at the end. Okay, now in our chapter specifically, in chapter 25, there are 5 short prophecies on the that talk about 4 nations. Ammon has 2 prophecies, Moab, Edom, and Plishtim. And all those prophecies have the same structure, very, very similar structure and similar language. All those prophecies use that term, Ya'an, because of blah, 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 blah. Right? Because those nations were happy in the fall of the Jewish people. Some of them also were instrumental in the fall of the Jewish people. Lachen. Therefore, they're going to get those, they're going to be punished themselves. And by that, they're going to understand who is the true ruler. Bidatem ki ani Hashem. Okay, so those are the kind of words that we're looking for. Ya'an, because X, lachen, therefore, here's the outcome, and some sort of a summary of that prophecy, Vidatem ki ani Hashem, or something along the nature of that phrase. Okay? Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. Shoshana. Okay. Can't hear you, Shoshana.
These 4 are
Yeah.
the chronically most consistent, I mean, oivim from Israel, of Israel.
We'll see. We'll see. So what I would like to do today is to take like a kind of a walk in the trail of history and examine the relationship that we have with each of those nations. Okay? We have a couple of Tanachim if you want to look around, because we're gonna look at other here, Maxine. We're gonna look at in other books as well. Okay, so with Ammon, let's start with the beginning. I'm gonna do the first 8 psukim or so. Vayivar Adonai elai lemor. בן אדם שים פניך על בני עמון וינבא עליהם, ואמרת לבני עמון שמעו דבר אדוני אלוהים, כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, יען אומרך האח אל מקדשי כי ניחל, ואל אדמת ישראל כי נשמה, ואל בית יהודה כי הלכו בגולה. אוקיי? לכן הנני נותנך לבני קדם למורשה, וישבו טירותיהם בך, ונתנו בך משכניהם, המה יאכלו פרייך, והמה ישתו חלבך, ונתתי את רבה לנווה גמלים, ואת בני עמון למרבץ צאן, וידעתם כי אני אדוני. Up until hey, right? So this is the end of the first prophecy, right? So we had Ya'an in Pasuk Gimel, and then Lachen Pasuk Daled, and then Vidatem ki ani Adonai. That's the end of the first prophecy. Let's read it quickly in English. The word of Hashem came to me saying, Son of man, direct your face towards the children of Ammon and prophesy against them. Say to the children of Ammon, hear the word of the Lord. Thus said Hashem, because you said, Horah, of my sanctuary when it was desecrated, and of the soil of Israel when it was laid waste, and of the house of Judah when they went into exile. Therefore, behold, I am delivering you to the people of the east as a heritage, and they will establish their palaces within you and place their dwelling places within you. They will eat your fruits and drink, and they will drink your milk. I will make Rabbah, that's Rabat ben Ammon, an abode of camels, and the land of the children of Ammon, a resting place of flocks. Then you will know that I am Hashem. Then the second prophecy immediately also about Ammon, Pasuk Vav, Kicho amar Adonai Elohim, Yan mach'acha yad v'raka'acha beregel, v'tismach b'chol sha'atecha b'nefesh el admat Yisrael, לכן הנני נתתי את ידי עליך, ונתתיך לבז לגויים, והכרתיך מן העמים, ועבדתיך מן הארצות, ואשמידך, וידעת כי אני אדוני. For thus said the Lord, because you clapped your hand and stamped with your foot and rejoiced with all your rashness of soul over the soil of Israel, therefore, behold, I will extend my hand against you and present you as spoils to the nations. I will eliminate you from the peoples and make you perish from among the lands. I will destroy you. Then you will know that I am Hashem. Yeah. What are you talking about? Where? Means you're going to be dispersed. You're going to be dispersed in different locations. We're in chapter 25. What pasuk are you? Pasuk Zayin, towards the end. Right. Correct. Correct. Not we. Ammon. This is Ammon. We're talking about the Ammonites. Look at the beginning of Pasuk, the Pasuk Aleph over there. Pasuk Bet, I'm sorry. Ben Adam sim panecha el benei Ammon v'yinaveh alehem. Okay? As I said, this is all about the other nations. It's not about us. All those prophecies. Okay? So with Ammon, that's the only nation that get two prophecies. Everybody else is going to get only one. And only this prophecy starts with Sim Panecha El, which is kind of unusual phrase that only yechezkel uses. Okay, fine. And it's also a direct second second person. He talks to them. It's not about them. He talks to them directly. He's going to talk about the other nations. He's going to talk about them, third person. So this is like one of those things that now what we need to explore, the more important to me, is why Ammon is so excited with the downfall of Israel. Yechezkel said, because you were part of the, you're going to be punished. Okay, fine. Question is why? So we have to go back into the history and understand Ammon. So who is Ammon? Okay, so Ammon is Ben Oni, right? That's Ben Ami, I'm sorry, Ben Oni. Ben Ami, the descendants of Ben Ami, i.e. the son/grandson of Lot, after he had relations with his younger daughter. And according to the Tanach, there's a very difficult relationship, ups and downs, mainly downs, between the Jews and the Ammonites, mainly about borders. Okay, mainly about borders. So if you look, for example, in Sefer Shoftim, we have in chapter 10, Sefer Shoftim chapter 10, we have a very let's just kind of read it a little bit. Okay, I'm in Sefer Shoftim, chapter 10, verses, I guess, like 7 through 18, something like that. 10. No, we're in chapter 10 of Shoftim. Yeah, and we're in verse 7. Right. Okay, God was angry and the Ammonites took over. The Ammonites gave us a lot of trouble for 18 years in that area, in the northern part of the land, Bagilad. Then the Ammonites crossed the border, i.e. the Jordan River, and they start fighting with Yehuda and Binyamin. And that was very difficult. Then the Jews wake up and they say, whoa, what have we done? We have sinned. They cry to Hashem, and we worship idols. And God answered Bnei Israel. He said, I helped you countless times from all those nations. And then after all I've done for you, you have abandoned me and worship other gods. Therefore, I'm not going to help you anymore. That's it. Go cry out to the gods that you've been worshiping. Let's see if that God is going to help you. The Jews said, God, please help us. We have sinned. Help us this time. And they kind of purify themselves and they get rid of the idols and they worship God. And then the Ammonites are kind of gathering into this massive attack on the Jewish people and they're ready to go. And here what happens? The Jew says, okay, we got to prepare for a battle. who is going to lead us. And indeed, the next chapter is a very famous story about Yiftach HaGiladi. Yiftach HaGiladi, that if you remember, he is the guy, the shofet, the judge, that it's a terrible story, extremely tragic. We discussed it many times over the years. He is rejected from his family, but at the end of the day, because he is the son of a prostitute, at the end of the day, the officers of the Jewish people, the elders, they come, they tell him, look, we need you. He said, okay, fine, I'll help you. And he is leading a very successful battle against the Ammonites. At the end of the chapter is the whole famous story about his daughter, and there's a whole huge machloket whether she was killed or not because of his vow, whatever. We discussed that many times before. I don't want to go into that story, but the point is that Yiftach is the one that has this massive battle with the Ammonites, and mainly because of the borders in the north over there. So he is able to defeat them, but he didn't conquer their entire land. Things get quiet for a little bit, and then the trouble come again. And if you go further a little bit in Shmuel Aleph, you'll see, why am I back here? Shmuel Aleph, go to chapter 11.
Nachash Amoni.
Correct, Nachash Amoni. This time, the person that actually is leading the successful battle against the Ammonites is the new king, Shaul. Okay. The story over there is Nachash Amoni. Nachash was the king of Ammon, and he's fighting the Jews over there in Yavesh Gilad. We discussed that story in the past also. Nachash Amoni basically makes an impossible request to the Jews. They tell them, you want me to, kind of let them, have a covenant with you, a peace treaty, whatever. I'm not going to make you trouble. You got to puncture your right eye. All the people in this region need to puncture their right eye. Of course, that's impossible. That's an impossible request. And what happens is that Shaul shows up, and I think I mentioned that in one of the classes many years ago. We discussed how come Shaul, who's from a different shevet, all of a sudden jumps into action here. What prompted that? There's no relations with Yavesh Gilad, and we actually discussed that his mother was from that region. It's a whole story by itself in the previous book, in the book of Shoftim, that was the consequence of the story of Pilegesh Bagivah. Remember the story of Pilegesh Bagivah, that woman that died, whatever, yes, and eventually was cut and sent. Correct. And because of that, there was a war between all the tribes in the tribe of Binyamin, and the tribe of Binyamin almost extinct. And then they have to figure out what are we going to help the Shevet of Binyamin. And they had like the whole story of Lecholel Bakramim and the whole thing. And this is where Tu B'Av comes, correct? Tu B'Av comes and invent, So so Shaul's mother or grandmother was one of those girls from Yavesh Gilad. So he still had a lot of family over there. Therefore, he gets into the picture. Whatever. Make a long story short. But the point is that Shaul is the one that fights Nachash Amoni and is actually very successful. Then in Shmuel Bet, if you want to look at chapter 10, we come to the time of David HaMelech. David HaMelech conquers the Ammonites because, again, interesting story, Hanun ben Nachash, if we spoke about Nachash Amoni before, So now it's his son, Hanun, have issues with the messengers of David. So when Nachash died, I guess they were sitting Shiva, and David sends a delegation to the Shiva house, and instead of accepting them and whatever, what they do is he disgraced them. He cut all their beards and the whole thing. What? Half of the beard, yeah. And so David takes it as an insult and goes into a battle. And during that time, so during the time of David and the time of later on of Shlomo, Ammon is subjugated to the Jewish kingdom. Okay, we're in control of the Ammonites. Not only that, the first wife of Shlomo is Naamah. Naamah is from Ammon, and she is the mother of Rechavam, his son, his oldest son, that's going to be the king after him, king of Yehuda. Now, what happens later on? So the Jewish people, the Jewish kingdom splits after Rechavam and Yerovam, Yehuda and Israel. And when that happens, Ammon became independent. Not because of the UN decided, but because the Jewish kingdom could not sustain the control that they have anymore. It was only Yehuda. They couldn't keep it up. And things were okay until the times of Uziyahu. And then they have, again, problems with Ammon. He goes into battle and he's successful, and he taxes them. And that continues for like another generation or two, until finally they also rebel and they join forces with the Babylonians in their war against Jehoiakim. That basically brings us to our time of yechezkel. In parentheses, I'm going to say that years later, after destruction of the temple and everything, Baalis, who was the king of Ammon at that time, is one of the guys that is involved with the murder of Gedalia ben Achikam. Gedalia ben Achikam, the last governor, the Jewish governor, the Tzom, yes, the last governor, and that's when he dies. Basically, that's the kind of the last remnant of Jewish sovereignty in Eretz Israel. So the Ammonim later on is going to be involved with that. So there's a lot of history. There's a lot of years of, and that is the reason why they are happy, because we conquered them several times, taxed them, so there was like a lot of issues. We could talk about Ammon a lot. Like, for example, the Torah is very clear that we're not allowed to marry them. There's no right. Gamdor asiri lo yavo lahem bikal Hashem. Unlike the Egyptians or any other nations that could convert. So Ammonites can convert, but they cannot be part of Am Yisrael. Moab also, we're going to talk about them. That's the next one. Why? Because they're the one who hired Bilam. That's a couple of weeks ago in the Parsha, right? As we know, both because of what we learned about Shlomo here, that his wife was an Ammonite, and also Ruth is going to be the equivalent from Moab. The halacha was, or became, or whatever, that's only that prohibition is on the male, but not on the female. And I want Moab. Okay. What? Okay. Interestingly enough, fast forward to the times of the Second Temple. In the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, we learned about a lot of intermarriage with the Ammonites, and there's a tension, a great tension. What do you do with all those? Do you kick them out, or do you? What do you do? On one hand, they converted. On the other, or married to Jews, whatever that means, they're part of the community. On the other hand, the Torah is very clear that they cannot be part of Am Yisrael. So what do you do with that? So obviously, Ezra and Nehemiah are not dealing with that. Generations later on, in the times of the Talmud already, we have stories like, for example, Yehuda Ger Amoni, that comes and before the Chachamim, and he says, can I be part of Am Yisrael or not? Like, and it's a fascinating machloket between Rabban Gamliel that says no, but Rabbi Yeshua says yes. Why? Because of the classic explanation, Allah Sancheriv ubilbelet aumot. It means that when Sancheriv, the king of Ashur, came, they did a transfer of population between the different locations and everything, and there's no real Ammonites and whatever, and all the Amalekim and all that kind of stuff, and therefore we don't really know, and because of there's a safek, then it's not really applicable, and therefore if they converted, it's fine. And by the way, that became the halacha. Okay, fine. Let's go to the next one. So we're back in our chapter, yechezkel 25. And we'll have to start moving, otherwise we're not going to finish this chapter. I really want to finish this chapter. We are in Pasuk Chet. Right? Moab. Yeah. Okay, I think it's until, we'll see. כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, יען אמור מואב ושעיר, הנה ככל הגויים ואת יהודה. לכן הנני פותח את כתף מואב מהערים, מהערב מקצהו, צבי ארץ בית הישיבות, בעל מעון וקרייתמה לבני קדם, על בני עמון ונתתיה למורשה, למען לא תזכר בני עמון בגויים, ובמואב אעשה שפטים, וידעו כי אני אדוני. Here it's also, he talks about Seir, and it's not over there. Oh yeah. Okay. So what's the story with them? Seir, first of all, is Edom. Right? So why, and I'm not so sure why they're connected, but later on, the third prophecy over there, the fourth prophecy, is going to be about Edom, specifically about Edom. Let's go into Moab and try to understand what is the background with them. So Moab is, first of all, it's Eretz Ramot. It's the eastern part of Yam HaMelach, the Dead Sea, kind of like that area. The Torah says to us, Cheshboni Ir Sichon, and he, meaning the Amorites, were fighting the Moabites in the beginning, and they conquered the land. Fine. So what happens? First, it's the Amorim, conquered the land took the land from the Moabites. Fine. That happens before the Jews, came into the picture. Then the Jews come out of Egypt, they're going, 40 years in the desert, and what happens? They conquer the land from Sichon, from the Amori, and give it to, if you remember, very famous story in the Torah, who wants to stay there? In the eastern part of the 2.5 tribes. and specifically that's the Nachala of Reuven. Right, Chatzi Menashe. So it's Gad, Reuven, and half of Menashe. And that particular area is the Nachala of Reuven. Fine. So Ramat Moab, that area that was given to Reuven, was very fertile. Okay, and Mesha, the king of Moab, that was his source for the taxes that he had to pay to the Jewish king. This is in Sefer Melachim. Now, what happens? Since this is a fertile land, many times, as the story, for example, of Megillat Ruth, people from Yehuda, when there was famine, when there was drought in Yehuda, moved from Yehuda to that land, the land of Moab. That's what Elimelech did with Naomi. Okay? That was not something unusual. People did that. Fine. Now, going back to the history, when the Jews want to come from the desert and they want to go into Eretz Israel, even though, again, Moab is also the son/grandson of Lot, so they're family. Even though they're family, they didn't greet us with water and bread, but, right? They didn't even let us go through the land. Nonetheless, even though they were not that hospitable, we are commanded, Al tatzar et Moab al tidgar b'milchama. We're not allowed to fight with them. Not only, so with Moab, what happened? They let us go through derech midbar Moab, through the desert, through the edge of the land. There was a desert, and the Jews had to pay. Ochel b'kesef tishberenu umayim. Yeah, had to pay for water and bread and food. Fine. Back to the story of a couple of weeks ago. So when the Jews conquered the land of the Amori of Sichon, they get close to Moab from the northern part. What happened? They get scared and they bring Bilam ben Beor, the prophet, to curse them. So in a similar way, we said also, even though Chazal said Lo yavo Amoni v'Amoni, it's the same story like Ammon. Later on, Chazal allowed that, specifically the female. Hence, we had Ruth and David HaMelech. Now, back to a little bit of history, right? So, the tension between the Moabites and the Jews continues throughout the book of Yoshua, and more specifically the book of Shoftim. Eglon, the king of Moab, crosses the Jordan and takes over Yericho. Remember, Yericho was taken by Yoshua. What happens? So there's a new judge, Ehud ben Gera. Remember the whole story with the two-edged sword that he had to have in his sleeve. What? He was left-handed, correct? And he kills a Glon, and he's able to win the battle. Tension until the times of David, and David is really like crushing them, and they become subordinate to the Jewish in the Jewish kingdom, and they pay taxes. And that stays until the time of King Achav. Remember Achav, the king with all the stories with Elijah, all that stuff. So we're talking about hundreds of years later. But that ended, and the Moabim starting to give us hard time. And not only that, they are able to take control of some of the land, and they give specifically Reuven and Gad are the tribes that are hurt most. And Correct. Right. Okay, so and that's basically stays. That's basically stays that they have their independence and they're like so we see the rich history with Moab as well. Let's go to the next one is Edom. ואמר אדוני אלוהים מפסוק י"ב יען עשות אדום במקום נקם לבית יהודה וישמעו השום ונקבו בהם לכן כה אמר אדוני אלוהים נתתי ידי על אדום והכרתי ממנה אדם ובהמה ונתתי חורבן מתימן ודדנה בחרב יפולו ונתתי את נקמתי באדום ביד עמי ישראל ועשו באדום כי אפי חומתי וידעו את נקמתי נאום אדוני אלוהים. 12. Hold on. Thus said Hashem, because Edom acted in a wreaking vengeance against the house of Judah and has incurred guilt by taking vengeance against them, therefore, thus said Hashem, I will extend my hand against Edom and eliminate it from it man and animal, and I will make it desolate from the south, and the inhabitants of Dedan, I guess it's a place, will fall by the sword. Then I will place my vengeance in Edom by the hand of my people Israel, and they will deal with Edom in accordance with my anger and my wrath. Then they will know my vengeance, the word of Hashem. So what is the background for the tension with Edom? By the way, who is Edom in our tradition, by the way? Esau, descendants of Esau, right? So we know it was red, and so according to the story in Bereshit, it was red, whatever. Admoni kulo kederetz, yeah. And but it's also the mountains are red, it's true. But later on, when Yaakov sends the messengers, לפניו אל עשיו אחיו ארצה שעיר שדה אדום. It's written in בפירוש that this is Edom. He is the father of the tribes of Edom. Fine. Okay, so these are the descendants of Edom. And again, here in Sefer Bamidbar, we read about them refusing. They refused to let the Jews go through their land on their journey to Israel. In spite of that refusal, we're not allowed to hate them, their family. Fine. Fast forward, Yoav ben Tzruya, remember him? He's the chief general of David. He is conquering the land of Edom, David told him, and they started giving taxes to David. And that taking over that land kind of opened in the times of David and later on in times of Shlomo, the route all the way from what we call Damascus to the Red Sea and to the port of what is today Eilat. Okay, so now in the times of Shlomo, they tried to rebel. Remember the story of Hadad. Hadad, the Edomite, he's called actually, and it's very interesting in the Tanach, he's called the Satan, one of the standing the troublemakers or the challenges that Shlomo has throughout his life. But nonetheless, the Edomites are subjugated until the times of Yehoshaphat. Not only that, they are even fighting against Moab. So to get with the Jews against Moab. Towards the end, though, of the first temple, i.e., close to the times of yechezkel, they're already invading to the southern parts of Yehuda. And in the time of the destruction of the temple, the times of yechezkel, they are part of the destruction of Beit HaMikdash. How do we know that? Because in Tehillim we have a pasuk that says, "Zechor Adonai livnei Edom et Yom Yerushalayim omrim aru aru ad hayisod ba." Okay, the Tehillim very, very specific about Edom. Edom was an active participant in what happened to Yerushalayim. Later on, it's interesting during the time of the Second Temple. To make a long story short, they actually become part of Am Yisrael. They all, there's a debate whether they were forced to convert or whether they did it willingly. It really doesn't matter. The time of the Hashmonaim, and eventually they become part. They all
buried into the kingdom.
yes, but so that's the end of Edom. There's an interesting debate among the Meforshim whether Edom is is Rome. Again, it's so Abarbanel says that that's the origin of Christianity. That's the origin of Rome, both historically and religiously. The Ran says that absolutely not, and the Ibn Ezra says also no. So it's a debate. Fine. That brings us to the last prophecy, the Plishtim. I'm in pasuk 15. ואמר אדוני אלוהים, יען עשות פלישתים בנקמה וינקמו נקם בשעת בנפש למשחית איבת עולם. לכן כה אמר אדוני אלוהים, הנני נוטה ידי על פלישתים והכרתי את כרתים ועבדתי את שארית חוף הים, ועשיתי בם נקמות גדולות ותוכחות חמה, וידעו כי אני אדוני, ותיתי את נקמתי bam. Thus said Hashem, because the Philistines have acted with vengeance, and they wreaked vengeance with rashness of soul to destroy with everlasting hatred. Therefore, thus said Hashem, behold, I'm extending my hand against the Philistines, and I will eliminate the Serethites, whatever that means, and destroy the remnant by the seashore. I will execute great vengeance against them with rebukes of wrath, and they will know that I am Hashem when I place my vengeance upon them. The historic background for the tension with the Plishtim is known, starting with the times of mainly of Shimshon, right, the last of the judges. If you remember, not only that he fights the Plishtim, he's marrying Delilah. She was Plishtim. But if we go to the Torah itself, there's mentioning of the Plishtim as well. If you remember, in Sefer Bereshit, Avraham goes to Eretz Plishtim, Avimelech, right? Yitzchak goes to Avimelech, Melech Plishtim in Gerar. Okay, doesn't show too much of tension at that time. They start to become an enemy to the Jewish people only the times of the Shoftim. It's Shimshon and Shamgar are the two judges that basically dealing with them. And then later on, it's the famous story that they take the Aron, the Aron Habrit. They take it in captivity in Kiryat Yearim, and eventually David decides to bring the Aron, to take it from the Plishtim and bring it to Yerushalayim. The king that has most fight with the Plishtim is actually Shaul, had many battles with them, and also especially the last one in Michmash, where he dies. and his son. The most famous story about the Plishtim is, of course, David and Goliath, right? So we know that. Gaza, correct. Southern part and southwest, correct. Southwest. Ashkelon and down. I'm sorry? It's coastal. Yes, correct. It was not only the coastal line, they yeah, I don't think so. But in any way, they give us trouble throughout the history, and again, with all those with all those nations, Ammon, Moab, Edom, and the Plishtim, they all have their own history with the Jewish people, and therefore they have a reason, so to say, to be happy with the downfall of the Jewish people. Therefore, come yechezkel and says, you're going to be punished as well for your behavior, for either your contribution to the situation or because not to show. It's not that you are righteous, and what's going on with the Jewish people is happening with the Jewish people. It has nothing to do with you, but you'll be punished for your behavior and whatever you've done to the Jewish people. Okay, that's what. That's one of the classic interpretation. Like they were supposed to do something, they took advantage of it. That's part of it. The other approach, which is a little bit harder, is that's the game. Everybody's controlled by God, and we don't really know why and how and to what extent. Yes, Shoshana?
I remember Vayichbad left Paro because God used those people to punish Israelites, and now they are punished because of what they did.
Yeah, the messenger is going to be, sometimes you kill the messenger as well. Yes. Okay. So this brings us to the end of this chapter. We meet again next week, same time, same place, and we'll be in chapter 26.
Thank you.